The Gay Agenda, 377A, Slippery Slope and the Road Ahead. What is the Gay Agenda? Ever heard of the book After the Ball? Guiding manifesto for a new brand of pragmatic gay activism. An agenda for change. A list of beliefs and actions to change among straights. Over the course of the last 11 episodes of this docuseries, we have reviewed some of the beliefs that LGBT activists sought to change among straights and examined the strategies and methods of LGBT activism to change society's beliefs on LGBT matters. In this episode, we move from beliefs to actions, laws that LGBT activists seek to effect in society, beginning with all sex acts among consenting adults are decriminalized. This brings us to Section 377A, the law in Singapore's penal code that criminalizes sex acts between men. For years, LGBT activists in Singapore have been fighting to repeal Section 377A, with multiple legal challenges launched. In 2018, Ready for Repeal, an online movement for the repeal of Section 377A was started. Pink Dot 2019. February 28, 2022, the Singapore Court of Appeal dismissed the latest set of challenges to Section 377A. The Court of Appeal held that the entirety of Section 377A is unenforceable, and so the appellants do not have the standing to pursue their constitutional challenges to that provision. 3rd March 2022. The government is considering the best way forward on Section 377A, which criminalizes gay sex, and in doing so, will respect different viewpoints and consider them carefully, said Law and Home Affairs Minister K. Shanmugam.
If and when we decide to move, we will do so in a way that continues to balance between these different viewpoints and avoids causing a sudden destabilizing change in social norms and public expectations.
We will address this contentious issue in 3 parts. Section 377A. Is this a good or bad law for Singapore? The slippery slope. What are the potential ripple effects of repealing 377A? The road ahead. What is the best way forward for Singapore? 377A. Ever thought of what the nature or purposes of laws are? The job of the legislature is to reason together over what is right and wrong, and to arrive at laws that are good for the community. Rights are shared by all persons by virtue of their human nature. 377A is a law that prohibits anal sex between men. Is anal sex between men right or wrong? Is anal sex between men good for the community? Is anal sex between men natural to human nature? What are your views on the human nature of sex? In Sexual Ecology, AIDS and the Destiny of Gay Men, a homosexual author, Avershi Vard, was quoted, "We have an agenda to create a society in which homosexuality is regarded as healthy, natural and normal. To me, that is the most important agenda item. Our effect is achieved without any reference to facts, logic or proof. Specifically, we want straights to believe that it's a valid and healthy condition. A person stuffing objects into his ears is endangering his hearing because he could puncture his eardrums or precipitate an infection. This is likewise true of the male genitals and the anus. Human generative organs are perfectly matched, the male for penetration, the female for reception. The matching takes place only in heterosexual intercourse. There is and can be no union of sexual organs in any same-sex acts. In Singapore, based on statistics by the Ministry of Health in 2020, homosexual and bisexual men are 30 to 50 times more likely than heterosexual men to contract HIV.
In Singapore, HIV infection rate remains high within our community, our gay community.
The most dangerous sexual act that you can engage in is receptive, unprotected anal sex. 100 times higher risk to contract HIV, and you can get every single STI I've mentioned in the anus.
According to Singapore's Department of STI Control, men who have sex with men are 25 times more likely to get infectious syphilis.
Hey, Isaac, what's wrong? What do you want me to say? that it burns when I pee, that I have a sore where I shouldn't have one, and I'm probably riddled with the entire rainbow spectrum of STIs.
We're increasingly seeing more and more older gay, bisexual, genderqueer men in our community being diagnosed with HIV and other STIs.
In August 2020, Amazon banned a book titled The Health Hazards of Homosexuality. Amazon said the 600-page book was offensive. The book took several years to compile. It brought together information from the Federal Centers for Disease Control, major medical professional groups, and other mainstream medical sources, as well as LGBT medical and advocacy groups, all documented in 1,800 endnotes with up-to-date links. Homosexuality is not just a private personal issue. It is an important public health issue. Does 377A signpost towards what's beneficial for the public health of Singapore? What can be done to better protect homosexual men from the risks of anal sex? Pink Dot 2021.
Discrimination is discrimination, whatever you call it. And to call a group of people criminals just because of who they are and how they express their love, that's discrimination.
In December 2021, the Singapore Academy of Law published Rightism, Reasonableness and Review, Section 377A of the Penal Code and the Question of Equality. Sexual orientation, the centerpiece of contemporary identity politics, is irrelevant to the offence, which focuses on conduct. Would you consider a law against public nudity discrimination against nudists? Do you agree with everything your friends do? Are you discriminating against them if you disagree with their actions? Ever thought of why LGBT discourse on 377A always revolves around gay rights and discrimination instead of homosexual behavior itself? The public should not be shocked and repelled by the premature exposure to homosexual behavior itself. It permits our enemies to draw attention to gay sex habits that provoke public revulsion. The imagery of sex per se should be downplayed. Emphasize the civil rights or discrimination side of things. What are your views on downplaying homosexual behavior and emphasizing discrimination? Is the gay agenda helpful or harmful for LGBT persons and Singapore society? No society can tolerate adults consenting to do whatever they wish. No nation can afford to encourage, promote, or advance conditions that result in serious damage to its youth. Society has an obligation to arbitrate and determine the place of homosexuality. Does the government have a responsibility to educate youths on the harmful effects of anal sex and to discourage it, as with illicit drugs or smoking? What message would the government be sending to society by repealing 377A? Moving beyond concerns for public health to concerns for public morality. A 2018 survey by the Institute of Public Policy found that the majority of Singaporeans view homosexual sex as wrong. Pergas do not support and rejects the attempt to repeal Section 377A of the Penal Code. This stand is based not only on religious grounds but also due to our concern towards moral and social values that can affect the family institution as well as the fabric of society. The National Council of Churches of Singapore does not support the repeal of 377A. The homosexual lifestyle is not only harmful for individuals but also for families and society as a whole. The repeal of Section 377A would lead to undesirable moral and social consequences. Minister Shanmugam in 2018.
Singapore, if you look at it on this issue, it's a deeply split society. The majority are opposed to any change to Section 377A. They are opposed to removing it. A minority, but I have to say a growing minority, want it to be repealed.
Singaporeans more liberal towards homosexuality compared with 5 years ago, IPS survey finds. Survey results point to a growing acceptance of gay sex as well as other matters surrounding gay rights. Gay sex in 2013, nearly half of Singaporeans aged 18 to 25, 47.6%, felt that this was always wrong. In 2018, the figure nearly halved, 25.4%. The proportion of 18-year-olds to 25-year-olds who felt gay sex was not wrong at all nearly tripled from 11.6% to 30.2% between 2013 and 2018. This could possibly be because of increased activism among millennials, especially when it comes to gay rights. Do you recall this strategic principle? Keep your message focused. Be focused in your efforts to reach the public via mass media. So talk about gay rights and leave it as that. Should LGBT activism dictate public morality? What kind of values should our laws and policies reflect? How has LGBT activism influenced the way you view LGBT issues in Singapore? Do you recall this strategy by LGBT activists? Political conspiracies. The goal here has been to forge a little entente or conspiracy with the power elite to jump ahead of public sentiment or ignore it altogether. In 2018, Taiwan voters rejected same-sex marriage in referendums. An overwhelming 72.48% voted against same-sex marriage. The large majority of Taiwan did not want same-sex marriage legalized. Yet in 2019, Taiwan legalized same-sex marriage in First for Asia. 2018, local LGBT activists at the Ready for Repeal town hall. (2021) IPS survey. 59.3% of Singaporeans feel that homosexuality is never or seldom justifiable. Should Singaporeans be concerned that LGBT activism seeks to sway Parliament into a decision on 377A that overrides public sentiments? In April 2022, a counter-movement to Ready for Repeal was launched. Protect 377A. Section 377A is a good law because it protects many men who are victims of the harms of homosexual sex and informs society that homosexuality is not a norm and it is not healthy. Section 377A is a good law because it affirms national values and public morality. Is 377A a good law? What factors should be considered by Singapore when deciding whether and how to move on 377A? 377A, is this a good or bad law for Singapore? Moving on to the slippery slope. Have you heard of this message from the gay community?
You think that we'll corrupt your kids if our agenda goes unchecked? Funny, just this once, you're correct. We'll convert your children. Happens bit by bit, quietly and subtly, and you will barely notice it. We're coming for them. We're coming for your children. Your agenda is coming home. The gay agenda is here.
The slippery slope. Is this a reality or fallacy? Would the key to unlocking the first gate also unintentionally unlock other gates? What other lock gates beyond 377A are LGBT activists looking to unlock? Several local LGBT activist organizations submitted reports to the United Nations for the May 2021 Universal Periodic Review. While the government reiterates that Section 377A will not be proactively enforced, the law's existence has unambiguously impacted legislation and public policies in Singapore. We urge the Singapore government to align existing policies with our recommendations. While their list comprises many policies for widespread social change, we will only address 3 in this segment. First, LGBT Affirming Sexuality Education. Ping.sg and Ugajaga, LGBT Affirming Sexuality Education, implement an evidence-based sexuality education curriculum that is inclusive of LGBT diversity. Other LGBT organizations equalize access to information on LGBTQ sexual and reproductive health by implementing comprehensive sexuality education programs. Do you recall what Aware Singapore is pushing for?
The United Nations and the World Health Organization advocates for countries to provide comprehensive sex education, or what we call CSE.
The learning objectives of children 5 to 8 years. It is important to understand the difference between biological sex and gender. There are many different kinds of families that exist around the world, different family structures and concepts of marriage. Educate and celebrate. We provide LGBT inclusive training. CEO of Educate and Celebrate.
We want our teachers to be really confident in the language of gender identity and sexual orientation. And really the bottom line is to completely smash heteronormativity. That's what we want to do.
In Taiwan.
因为其实蛮多的学校讲到这个同婚，然后讲到性倾向、性别气质就差不多了。
妈，你看，今天老师看到我的画。我看你画了什么啊？老师教我们说，男生可以和男生结婚，所以我以后长大也要和女生结婚呢。
In the UK.
Our children! Our choice!
These parents don't want their children taught about same-sex relationships.
We are having our children come home with material that contradicts our moral values.
One of the handouts that concerns me the most is called the Genderbread Person. They teach that gender is a spectrum, that you can choose to be whatever you want. You could be all female one day, and the next day feel like you're neither female or male.
Remember that gender is not binary, right?
There's a spectrum.
In New Zealand, children 1 to 8 years old are taught to challenge homophobia, transphobia, sexism, and gender-based violence. Schools are encouraged to question gender norms, gender binaries, gender stereotypes, and sex norms. For example, the assumption that sex characteristics at birth are always male or female. In Canada,
there is a lot of identities that exist between the male and female identities. Some of those include non-binary, gender fluid, gender queer, non-conforming, or transgender.
Gender ideology is not science. It is an ideology.
People like our parents or grandparents, they may not be as informed about these topics.
Not only are they teaching lies to these kids, but they are indoctrinating them to reject the truth when it comes from their parents.
In the US,
we just want it to be science-based. It should be biology, how to take good care of themselves, how to have good relationships. This is ideology-driven.
The health education framework covers a variety of health-related topics for grades K through 12. Among other things, it suggests teachers talk with kindergartners about gender identity, encourage using LGBTQ inclusive language, and once students get to 7th grade, navigating relationships and having safe sex.
How has LGBT affirming sexuality education impacted the young, especially teenage girls?
In 2018, 2% of high school students said they were transgender, so that's 2 in 100 kids. That's an enormous increase over what was historically the rate of gender dysphoria in the population, which was 0.01%, so 1 in 10,000 people. Went from roughly 1 in 10,000 people to 2 in 100 high school students. We also know that between 2016 and 2017, the number of females requesting gendered surgery in the United States quadrupled. The leading demographic asking for gender transition is teenage girls with no childhood history of gender dysphoria.
11th March 2022. Minister Shanmugam was asked if there would be changes to sexuality education if 377A was repealed. Minister said that if there are changes in the law, every ministry will have to work through the potential impact and consequences and ascertain what needs to be done in line with our society's values. Currently, the Ministry of Education's Sexuality Education teaches students what homosexuality is, the importance of respect and empathy, and the law concerning homosexual acts in Singapore. How would repealing 377A impact sexuality education in Singapore? What are your views on comprehensive sexuality education? How will LGBT plus affirming sexuality education affect Singaporean children and parents? Next, unrestricted media portrayals of LGBT plus persons. Pink.sg and Uga Jaga. Remove all discriminatory guidelines in content codes that references LGBT. Include sexual orientation and gender identity in program content. Allow public advertisements which promote the health and well-being of the LGBT plus community. Other LGBT organizations. Rectify media codes, policies and practices that prohibit neutral or positive portrayals of LGBTQ persons.
Because 377A makes gay men criminals, it also gives the government and media authorities the excuse to block out and to censor any positive portrayals of LGBTQ people in the media.
Why are positive media portrayals of LGBTQ persons important? Strategy. Good propaganda. We have in mind a strategy as calculated and powerful, or if you prefer, manipulative, to reach traits through the mainstream media. We are talking about propaganda. Propaganda relies more upon emotional manipulation than upon logic, since its goal is to bring about a change in the public's feelings. Our effect is achieved without any reference to facts, logic, or proof. The purpose and effect of propaganda is to promote a climate of increased tolerance for homosexuals. Expose them to an unending series of positive gay images, enhancing public receptiveness and sensitivity.
To normalize it, I'm still waiting for the day where you can see like a MediaCorp Channel 8 show where it's not like a love triangle with 2 guys and 1 girl, it's like a love triangle with 3 guys.
Have you seen the slogans or ads? Love is love. We love the same way you do. Same love. Same love. Is this true? Is what is being presented to the public representative of the gay community? Our ads are lies. We know it, but it makes no difference that our ads are lies because we are using them to ethically good effect. In June 2021, the live stream of Pink.13 was promoted as suitable for children. Do you consider such content suitable for children? Today, LGBT themes are being introduced to children globally.
This family has 2 mommies, they love each other so proudly, and they all go marching in the big parade.
Okay, everybody, I want you to meet my brother Dave, hi. His husband Frank, hi. And my sobrina Mia, my niece. Hi, Mia.
I am playing the fairy godmother. Magic has no gender. We are presenting this character as genderless.
It's becoming more prominent. I mean, it's catching on because it's the hot topic. It's all over the media, social media in particular. It's in the entertainment industry.
Sawyer also happens to be a transgender girl. Once she told us that she identified as a girl, she immediately wanted to grow her hair out.
It made me feel good and confident, and it made my insides match my outsides. My advice is just be yourself.
Hello, this is Jazz Jennings, and I am going to do a reading of my book, I Am Jazz. I have a girl brain, but a boy body. This is called transgender. Different is special. I am happy. I am proud.
You love me. You're such an idiot. I love you too.
Now, DC Comics has announced that its latest Superman will be bisexual. John Kent is the most recent superhero to come out, following versions of Captain America, Aquaman, and Batman's sidekick, Robin.
In November 2021, Marvel released Eternals, featuring a gay superhero with a husband and son. Disney has confirmed that their new film, Lightyear, prequel to Toy Story, will contain a same-sex kissing scene. The film is slated to be released in June 2022. 30th March 2022. Leaked videos expose Disney's not at all secret gay agenda.
Our leadership over there has been so welcoming to my not at all secret gay agenda. Wherever I could, just basically adding queerness.
Karen Burke, president of Disney General Entertainment, said she aims to have at least half of the characters in upcoming stories identify as LGBT or racial minorities. What are your views on the normalization and propagation of LGBT themes in the media? How would removing restrictions of LGBT plus themes from our media code affect Singaporean children and parents? Lastly, LGBT plus marriage and parenting rights. Ready for repeal? Repealing 377A will not automatically lead to the legalization of same-sex marriage and adoption of children by same-sex couples. That is another conversation for another day. Would repealing 377A draw us closer to legalizing same-sex marriage and parenting? Should this conversation take place before or after the repeal of 377A? Since the year 2000, many countries that had legalized homosexual sex have gone on to legalize same-sex marriage and parenting. After the ball, gays are permitted to all standard rights of marriage and parenthood. In 2007, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong preempted this agenda.
Supposing we moved on 377A, I think the gay activists will push for more, following the example of other avant-garde countries in Europe and America, to advocate same-sex marriages and parenting.
Ping.sg and Uga Jaga recognize same-sex long-term partnerships and marriages conducted in other jurisdictions. Other LGBT groups permit and recognize registration of same-sex marriages and partnerships in Singapore or elsewhere.
The majority of Singaporeans will strenuously oppose these follow-up moves by the gay campaigners, and many who are not anti-gay will be against this agenda. And I think for good reason.
Where will you personally draw the line on this agenda? Are same-sex marriages just like heterosexual marriages?
These two really knew how to throw a party. There were the dancers dressed as policemen. I mean, when they started stripping, that drove the crowd wild, as you would expect with a very gay crowd. I think the real highlight was really the giant ice stick sculpture.
Have you ever attended a straight wedding that featured strippers and genitalia that drove the crowd wild? Homosexual activist Marsha Gesson.
Fighting for gay marriage generally involves lying about what we're going to do with marriage when we get there. Because we lie that the institution of marriage is not going to change. And that is a lie.
According to the American College of Pediatricians, research has demonstrated considerable risk to children exposed to the homosexual lifestyle. Violence between same-sex partners is 2 to 3 times more common. Same-sex partnerships are significantly more prone to dissolution. Homosexual men and women are reported to be promiscuous with serial partners. Domestic violence, a silent epidemic in the LGBT community. Over 50% of gay men and almost 75% of lesbian women reported that they were victims of psychological intimate partner violence.
43% of lesbian women and over 60% of bisexual women have suffered from domestic abuse.
I thought this new relationship was a dream come true, but it turned out to be a living nightmare. I knew if I did not take the step to leave, I would have been dead.
A long-term study in 2020, 2 decades of same-sex marriage in Sweden. People in same-sex marriages have higher divorce risk than those in opposite-sex marriages. Compared with people in other unions, women in same-sex unions have a divorce rate that is nearly twice as high. relationships between gay men don't usually last very long.
Well, many of us will experience dating that lasts 1 to 3 months, but if you're lucky, will last more than 60 seconds.
동성애자들도 뭐 자기들도 한 남자를 만나서 결혼하고 살고 싶다는데 그런 개념이 없어요. 한 남자가 보통 남자 게이들이 일생 동안 150에서 550명까지를 관계를 한다는 거예요.
The gay community has never had any traditions of faithfulness corresponding to straight marriage. I believe it is time someone in the gay community addressed the elephant in the room. That is open relationships. Monogamous gay relationships are fast becoming nothing but a gay fairy tale. An LGBT activist wrote, rather than being transformed by the institution of marriage, gay men could simply transform the institution itself, making it more sexually open, even influencing their heterosexual counterparts.
Ian Jenkins, Alan Mayfield, and Jeremy Allen Hodges are 3 men raising babies together. They're all in a relationship with each other.
I just don't think humans are actually built to be monogamous animals. So having an open relationship allows you to learn more, grow more with an additional person.
What are your views on children being raised in LGBT families? Do all LGBT persons or children with same-sex parents support this? Douglas Murray, a gay man and author.
A decade ago, almost nobody was supportive of gay marriage. Even gay rights groups weren't in favor of it. A few years down the road, and it has been made into a foundational value of modern liberalism. How did this happen?
With the gay campaigners, as with others, we're dealing with relatively small but very noisy groups of people who have the cultural dominance.
Ever heard of La Manif pour tous? In 2013, in France, hundreds of thousands, including gay rights groups, protested against the legalizing of same-sex marriage.
Je suis bien placé, en tant qu'homosexuel, pour dire que la Manif pour tous n'a rien d'homophobe.
Et l'enfant a été au cœur de ces manifestations en disant qu'il avait ce droit de ne pas être privé délibérément d'un père ou d'une mère. Il peut en être privé par des séparations, des deuils, à ce moment-là on compense, on fait ce qu'on peut, mais dire par avance qu'on peut se passer d'un père ou d'une mère et qu'on peut concevoir délibérément des enfants qui seront privés d'un père ou d'une mère, nous avons considéré ensemble que c'était une atteinte profonde à ces droits.
Les homosexuels se moquent de ce projet de loi parce qu'ils ont eu un père et une mère comme tout le monde et qu'ils veulent que ce soit le cas pour tous les enfants.
Same-sex marriage will not redefine marriage. It will undefine it and unravel it, and in so doing will undefine children, depriving children of their right to a mom or a dad.
My name is Millie. I have lesbian parents and I was raised atheist and have no religious affiliations. The gay community is promoting this ideology that love is love and that we don't actually need any biological roots at all to be parented well and to be well adjusted and happy. This has been incorrect for me and many others. The truth is that growing up with 2 mothers forced me to be confused about who I was.
I didn't really have a male example to follow. I had, 2 very loving mother figures, but as I grew up and became a man and then started considering whether or not I wanted to pursue girls, I didn't have the confidence to meet girls. I didn't have the confidence to ask them out on dates, and so I just assumed that I was gay.
I recognized that while my mother was a fantastic mother, and most of what I do well as a mother myself I do because that's how she parented me, she can't be a father. Her partner, an incredible woman, both of these women have my heart, cannot be a father either.
Katie Faust started Them Before Us, a global children's rights movement to advocate placing children's rights before adult desires.
Children actually have universally recognized rights to their mother and father. It is in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child.
Why would we endorse or incentivize or promote the idea that biology doesn't matter and that moms and dads are interchangeable?
It's not that gays and lesbians are bad people, but in the end, kids want the biological progenitors of them that will never, ever die within children, nor should it.
Children have a right to be in relationship with their mother and father whenever possible. And as a society, we shouldn't normalize a family structure that requires children to lose one or both parents to be in that household.
Should the desires of adults supersede the rights of children to be loved and raised by their biological mothers and fathers? Did you know that same-sex couples are turning to assisted reproduction to have children? Local LGBT activists rectify discriminatory laws that contravene the reproductive rights of LGBTQ persons by ensuring that assisted reproductive technology is available to everyone, regardless of marital status, sexual orientation, and gender identity. True equality doesn't stop at marriage. It recognizes the barriers LGBTs face in forming families and proposes solutions to overcome these obstacles. Men Having Babies is dedicated to providing gay men with educational and financial support to achieve parenthood through surrogacy.
Yes, we are expanding the family. 2 babies, people. 2 babies are on the way. Those are 2 different wombs, and those are 2 different babies.
16年，我16年去香港准备代孕的那些，
花了2年的时间。
对，前后其实花到了2年整。
What are your views on gay men paying to use women's wombs to obtain children? What are your views on children being raised without biological mothers? How does this affect women and children?
The primal wound is what happens when you separate a baby and its mother. Babies know their own mothers through all their senses, and when for some reason the baby is separated from that mother, the prenatal bonding is interrupted. There is a trauma that happens to both the baby and the mother, and they both feel as if something is missing within them.
Surrogacy is, by its very nature, an injustice to the child. Birth is intended to be a continuation of the mother-child bond, not the moment at which the child suffers an intentional primal wound. It's the day when a baby should see the mother she already loves for the first time, not the last. While gay men turn to surrogacy, lesbian women turn to fertility treatment with the help of sperm donors. In Singapore,
I'm Brenda, this is Pauline, and this is Velda. Velda is 15 months old. We are 2 moms. I'm Mama, this is Mommy. So we went overseas and we did IVF.
So we have an option to choose your sperm donor.
Is there a particular reason why you chose an Angmo donor?
I don't want to say it because it's so shallow, it's just because they look cuter.
such families are made to be broken, or rather, broken to be made by design. This is a grotesque act of injustice to the children who are misused in this way and for this purpose. They are deliberately denied the possibility of being with both parents.
My mom is very important to me because she teaches me about things about being a girl. I am learning from her to be a good woman, wife, and mother someday. My dad is also very important to me because he protects me and helps me get the confidence to be a girl who is growing up to be a woman. He takes care of problems in a way that my mom cannot. Since every child needs a mom and a dad to be born, I don't think we can change that children need a mom and a dad. Which parent do I not need, my mom or my dad?
We have had people talking behind our backs to say that we are making a very selfish decision to have a child. We shouldn't bring an innocent life into the world knowing that she's not going to have a father. How will she grow up without a father? They can keep their comments to themselves because it doesn't really affect us.
When we decide to treat kids as commodities, right, when we decide to say that they're just items to be cut and pasted into the home of any adult that has the means to get their hands on them, we're willingly putting kids at risk. And we're breaking their heart.
What are your views on same-sex couples acquiring children through assisted reproduction? Should children be treated as commercial commodities? Protect 377A. LGBTQ activism will not stop at the repeal of 377A. The reason advanced by LGBTQ activists to repeal 377A will ultimately be the same reason put forward by them for other legislative changes such as legalizing same-sex marriage. Slippery slope arguments, whether based on principle or empirically based predictions, should not be discounted out of hand. Where a proposed change would impact major values and involve undesirable outcomes, it is irresponsible not to engage in reflection. The slippery slope. What are the potential ripple effects of repealing 377A? moving on to the road ahead. After the ball, we must push ahead, and this means knowing exactly which road we want to travel. We want straights to revoke all laws criminalizing sex acts between consenting adults. Love is love. Legalize incest now. Consensual incest should be decriminalized. Richard Morris, it seems to be as unjust as the law that used to imprison gay people. German Ethics Council calls for incest between siblings to be legalized by the government. Parent files lawsuit in New York seeking to overturn laws barring incestuous practices so that they can marry their adult child. In Singapore, Section 376G of the Penal Code prohibits incest, sex with a close family relative. Love is love. Will the decriminalization of homosexual sex acts open the gate to the legalization of other sex acts? Should all laws criminalizing sexual acts between consenting adults be repealed? We want straights to provide for us, by special legislation and affirmative action if need be, the same rights to public speech and assembly, to work, shelter and public accommodations, to legal marriage and parenthood that straights enjoy. What are your views on giving the LGBT community special legislation and affirmative action? Transgender residents in Palm Springs, California are eligible to receive up to $900 per month solely by identifying as transgender or non-binary, no strings attached. German car park announces diversity spaces for LGBTQ+ community. Where do you personally draw the line between equal treatment and special treatment for the LGBT community, or differentiate between tolerance and affirmation of LGBT sexual practices? The gay agenda. What are the similarities? How has the list expanded? We will now focus on this one distinct difference. Pink.SG and Ugajaga recognize gender identity. Introduce a non-surgical route for gender recognition. Other LGBT organizations create a process for consulting with local transgender organizations on legal gender recognition processes.
Imagine if every day girls and boys recited, "We, the citizens of Singapore, pledge ourselves as one united people, regardless of race, language, religion, or gender." Gender equality would quickly be imprinted in the collective consciousness of all these young minds.
What do LGBT activists mean with the word gender? Simone de Beauvoir.
As de Beauvoir famously wrote, one is not born, but rather becomes woman.
You are not born a gender, you choose to become your gender. Judith Butler, a lesbian gender theorist who popularized the term gender identity.
In 1990, she released the book that rocketed her to global fame, Gender Trouble. Butler openly, proudly ignores science, writing in Gender Trouble that her critique refuses to search for the origins of gender.
That nobody really is a gender from the start. I know it's controversial, but that's my claim.
This is the theory of gender performativity. It holds that our gendered ways of living are just a performance, and that performance has nothing to do with biology.
What are your views on the idea that gender has nothing to do with biology? What happens when scientific biological facts are rejected in favor of ideas?
Thanks to Judith Butler, there's no biological substratum that defines gender in any way. It's not worth even going into, except that it's absolutely epidemic everywhere.
We review the global effects of the LGBT+ gender ideologies in different spheres of society. Freedom of speech. A woman lost her job after saying that people cannot change their biological sex. Students suspended from education program for saying a man is a man, a woman is a woman. A non-binary union rep complained after a train conductor said, "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. In response, the train company said, "I'm really sorry to see this. Our train managers should not be using language like this." Family structures.
This is Ari, Gwendolyn and Brinifer. These polyamorous parents let their children choose their gender. And for their oldest child, Hazel, that's neither male nor female. And 2.5-year-old Sparrow has yet to make a choice about their gender. This is Ellen. She fell in love with Rodrigo. Ellen was born biologically male and Rodrigo was born biologically female. The pair are now new parents to a healthy daughter.
School policies. Kids as young as 4 can now change gender in Scottish schools without parental consent. Transgender students should use whatever bathroom or locker room they prefer. August 2021 in the US. The Loudoun County School Board voted on a policy that allows transgender students to use bathrooms and locker rooms based on their gender identity. A few months later, judge rules Loudoun County teen sexually assaulted female student in girls' bathroom. The victim's father said that the male student forcibly sodomized his 9th grade daughter in a school bathroom while wearing a skirt.
This is occurring all across America in public schools that have these ludicrous policies, asinine policies that deny reality.
Children transitioning without parental consent.
She was being socially transitioned by the school without my knowledge. I know now that this therapist had been calling my child a boy and using their, made-up name.
For the past 11 months, Canadian father Robert Hoogland's now 15-year-old daughter has been receiving testosterone injections by court order.
And I kept saying, no, this is not going to happen, I'm not consenting.
The highest court in British Columbia declared that Rob's daughter should continue taking testosterone.
The father was charged for speaking publicly on this.
Justice Taman felt that an appropriate sentence for this father was to go to prison between 6 to 9 months. And yes, that's right, prison.
Sports policies.
Terry Miller and Andrea Yearwood dominating the competition at the Girls Track and Field Championships in Connecticut earlier this month. Coming in first and second place, respectively.
We're female, so we wouldn't run on any other team but the female team.
I lost out on countless opportunities to get placements, get titles, and qualify for further meets.
Look, this is not fair. We just want to restore a level playing field to our sport.
Transgender woman Rachel McKinnon wins Cycling World Championships. Olympics. New Zealand weightlifter Laurel Hubbard becomes first trans woman at Games. Transgender MMA fighter wins her debut fight after choking out opponent. Leah Thomas makes history as first out trans woman to win NCAA swimming championship.
We are living in a South Park episode, 462 in a male competition and then #1 in a female. That, it's just comical. It's a mess.
If we don't protect female-only athletics, we will remove opportunities for women to participate in sports. Period.
Healthcare. Yes, men can have periods and we need to talk about them. It's harmful to equate periods with womanhood. Transgender activists free-bled in a photo to show that men can menstruate too and break down gender stereotypes. You can be a man and have a baby. An Australian Labour leader has come under fire for saying men can't have babies. A hospital's trust in the UK introduces new trans-friendly terms. Gender-inclusive language includes changing breastfeeding to chest feeding, breast milk to human milk, mothers to birthing parents, and fathers to co-parents or second biological parents.
Under conversion therapy bans, questioning a child's gender identity is now illegal.
The first phase in the young adolescent age is to give what are called a pubertal blocker, to give a medicine to block the progression of puberty, so you don't go through the wrong puberty.
Hormone blockers? Medicine is supposed to be based on evidence. We know that there are going to be harms down the line.
Doctors to be paid for prescribing hormone blockers to trans patients. Remove sex from public birth certificates, American Medical Association says. The American Psychiatric Association updated their latest DSM-5-TR and changed natal sex to birth-assigned gender.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition? No.
Yeah.
I can't. I'm not a biologist.
Law enforcement.
I'm really pleased to be here today to be launching the Police with Pride car. What we want to do is show that Merseyside Police is an employer, an organisation that really wants to ensure that we embrace all diversity into our organisation.
Police Scotland. Rape suspects can choose to self-identify as female.
For the people that say, well, that stuff never happens, it's happening. It's happening.
J.K. Rowling is being slammed by transgender activists for criticizing the Scottish police for saying they'd allow rape suspects to self-identify as female. California to house transgender inmates based on gender identity. Women prisoners who call transgender inmates he or him face extra jail time.
There's all these right-on LGBTQI people all said, what are you doing talking about trans people in women's prisons? Trans women are women, shut up, bigot. And then we had a case of one famous case of a guy who said he was a woman, went into a women's prison. He'd been done for rape before, he still had a penis, and he went into a women's prison and raped a load of women.
What are your views on affirming gender identity? Has special legislation for trans ideology made it unsafe for women and children? Are LGBT+ gender ideologies beneficial or damaging to society?
It's unfortunate, though, that the activists that propel our movement in a certain trajectory, insist on giving us this reputation of being anti-woman, anti-children, anti-science, and anti-reality. And those are things that a healthy society will always defend.
What is a woman?
Well,
can you tell me what a woman is?
No, I can't. Because it's not for me to say. Womanhood looks different for everybody.
What do you define a woman as?
An adult human female. You stood up here and said trans women are women.
Yes.
Tell me what you mean. What is a woman?
I do not define what a woman is because I do not identify as a woman.
There is no certain definition of a woman.
I don't really like to label things, you know?
Could a woman get testicular cancer?
Yes.
If you want to walk around saying you're a woman with a penis, then good for you.
I'm a woman with a penis, guys.
How can you both be non-binary, meaning neither binary gender, neither a man or a woman, that's how you identify, but then claim the word lesbian as a sexual orientation when a lesbian means a woman that is attracted to other women?
If I told you that I was a woman, what would your response be?
Good for you.
If I told you that I was Chinese, what would your response be? If I told you I'm 6 feet 5 inches, what would you say?
If you thoroughly debated me or explained why you felt that you were 6'5", I feel like I would be very open to saying that you were 6'5", or Chinese, or a woman.
It shouldn't be hard to tell a 5'9" white guy that he's not a 6'5" Chinese woman. But clearly it is. Why? What does that say about our culture?
What are your views about a culture that is unable to define a woman? What impact does this have on children, women's rights, and even men? Starting on April 11, 2022, US citizens will be able to select an X as their gender marker on their US passport application. An option will become available for other forms of documentation in 2023. LGBT activists in Singapore.
On our IC it says male or female. Should we have at least one other option on our IC to have another gender apart from male or female?
Will sex be replaced with gender, including other genders on our ICs, passports, or other forms of documentation? March 2022. The Singapore government conducted an LGBTQ survey open to everyone regardless of sexual orientation and/or gender identity. Participants were asked their gender, male, female, or others. What are your views on the government's inclusion of a third constructed category of gender?
In June 2021, Aware posted on their Instagram, "There is no definitive way to express gender. Pronouns validate who a person is."
My name is Sean Francis Han, and my pronouns are he, him.
I'm Elijah. I'm 19. I use they, them pronouns.
We are speaking to Elijah Tay, who comes back to the show to tell us about My Queer Story, which they founded when they were just 16. They're 19 now.
Regardless.sg, a local news and media site. You've never had to do this before, so why do so now? When someone asks for your pronouns, they are stating their philosophical belief that gender identity and biological sex are uncorrelated and testing your willingness to affirm the same. Trans activism attempts to cudgel people into compliance through language policing. Doctors sacked for refusing to refer to transgender women as she. A Virginia teacher was fired for refusing to use a trans student's pronouns. Columbia University employees can be dismissed for using wrong pronouns. In Singapore, in February 2021, WP's James Lim asked whether there are any plans by the ministry to systematically compile preferred gender pronouns for students and to ensure that teachers respect such pronoun usage in class. Uga Jaga. The teaching staff needs to adopt habits such as introducing themselves with their pronouns and encouraging students to do the same while using gender-inclusive language such as they and them. Control language and you control thought. Control thought and you control action. Control action and you control the world. What are your views on language policing by LGBT activists? How have such ideologies made it unsafe for disagreement? Executive Director of Uga Jaga. Misgendering can increase the risk of depression, self-harming and suicidal behavior. When activists threaten that not using one's preferred pronouns exacerbates trans suicides. This is emotional manipulation through strategic and authoritarian victimhood. In any campaign to win over the public, gays must be portrayed as victims in need of protection.
The victim card, blaming you for their actions. For instance, pushing back against my assertions will cause me to self-harm. You're literally killing trans people.
What are your views on the use of preferred gender pronouns as a tool of control? Is LGBT activism a matter that only affects LGBT people, or is there a price to pay at every level of society? Let's be blunt. Those who aren't with us in this effort are most decidedly against us and against the gay community as a whole.
Every argument somehow, everyone that went against progressive think was somehow a racist or a bigot or a homophobe or a transphobe or a name another phobe. Like everybody. And I thought, this can't be right. Instead of seeing intellectual arguments, I saw just a lot of accusations and slandering and slurring.
Look around and you see people in the room who come to university to learn and being taught that this is actually the way that you...
No speech for Jordan Peterson.
Your political
Jordan Peterson is a known transphobe with a history of denying the fundamental humanity of trans and non-binary people.
I'm Ariel. I'm a lesbian. Never in my life have I been more canceled, tortured, tormented, harassed than by members of my own community. Never have I seen people that use the word bigot so frequently and not see the hypocrisy and irony in themselves.
I'm bisexual. It's ironic that these people preach tolerance, but with that same very breath, they harass and belittle you for not being like them.
Do you recall this viral TikTok video that was labeled transphobic?
Yo guys, I made a new sexuality now, actually. It's called super straight. I only date the opposite gender, women, that are born women. So you can't say I'm transphobic now because that's just my sexuality, you know?
So this video has amassed millions and millions of views. It has revealed a lot about the woke side of the LGBT community. The originator of Super Straight has been getting a ton of death threats from activists. Why would the community of love and acceptance and that believes in not shaming people for their sexuality be sending death threats?
Man jailed for inciting violence, threatening judge who dismissed Section 377A challenges. Can we please torture the corrupted judges until they effing crumble and repeal 377A on the spot? I'd love to personally torture them to their breaking point. Well, love is an excellent end in itself, but it isn't half so compelling as a means. It is actually rage, not love, that lay behind all those progressive events. Ice-cold, controlled, directed rage. Why is rage and hate a common feature in LGBT activism? Those who aren't with us are most decidedly against us. Does LGBT activism promote harmony or divide society?
Heteronormativity has to do with sexual orientation. It's the assumption that being heterosexual is the default normal sexual orientation. Cisnormativity has to do with gender. It's the assumption that being cisgender, when your sex assigned at birth matches your gender identity, is the default normal gender identity. There is no normal. Reframing what's normal when it comes to sexual orientation and gender identity affirms the identities and experiences of LGBTQ+ people.
In Singapore, SAFE and US, heteronormativity and cisnormativity upholds a false hierarchy of sexualities. Repeal 377A. Why? The existence of 377A clearly reflects the heteronormative attitudes of our governing bodies, lawmakers, and society at large.
Our goal as allies or people who are woke or who are informed is to dismiss these preconceptions that people should be A or B, that should be heteronormative or should be heterosexual or cisgender, pardon me. Are we all on the same page so far?
Are the social norms of heteronormativity and cisnormativity an assumption or a fact? Why do LGBT activists seek to reframe what is normal? Camille Paglia, a lesbian academic and social critic.
My overview of history and in my noticing that in late phases, you all of a sudden get a proliferation of homosexuality, of sadomasochism, of gender games. This is a symptom of decadence. Western culture is in decline.
What does decadence and decline mean? Lessons for Singapore on the Rise and Fall of Empires by Lim Siong Guan, founder chairman of Honour Singapore. The stages of the rise and fall of great nations went through the same 7 stages. Age of pioneers, conquest, commerce, affluence, intellect. Finally, we come to the age of decadence and decline. The age of decadence. The nation is characterized by defensive-minded military, decaying morals, loss of religion, frivolous consumption of food, entertainment, sex, and a complete focus on individual interests.
I've defined myself as a decadent, in my view, looking at the history of Egypt, of Babylon, of Rome, of Byzantium. Everyone's so busy, with themselves, who they are in terms of sexual orientation or gender.
So that the proliferation of cultural identities, the proliferation of all sorts of possibilities is actually a sign that we're
on the verge of collapse.
In Sex and Culture by Oxford social anthropologist J.D. Unwin. Increased sexual constraints, either pre- or post-nuptial, always led to increased flourishing of a culture. Conversely, increased sexual freedom always led to the collapse of a culture 3 generations later. What are your views on the proliferation of sexual and gender identities as a sign of a civilization on the verge of collapse? How would breaking down sexual and gender social norms impact our nation? The road ahead. What is the best way forward for Singapore? Pink.sg.
To repeal 377A! Because of Section 377A, we deal with discrimination every day.
Protect 377A. Disagreement is not discrimination. Section 377A is the first line of defense against a slew of LGBTQ plus affirming policy changes that would affect virtually every sphere of our lives. March 2022.
In this latest judgment, the court noted the compromise which Singapore has struck in respect of Section 377A is unique.
The merits of retaining 377A was subject to robust and lengthy debate in Parliament in 2007, culminating in a uniquely Singaporean resolution, a political compromise in which 377A would be retained on the basis that 377A would not be proactively enforced.
The court recognized that the government did this in order to avoid driving a deeper wedge within our society.
The current position of keeping Section 377A allows LGBTQ persons to live freely in Singapore without threat to life or liberty and without further dividing our society.
Homosexuals work in all sectors, all over the economy, in the public sector as well, and in the civil service as well. They are free to lead their lives, free to pursue their social activities.
But it's hard to be gay in Singapore, right?
It's not hard.
Huh?
It's not hard.
You sure?
Yeah, it's not hard. A lot of service industry people are gay because they are great at what they do. Their designers are gay. They're great what they do.
You always talk about reintegrating the transgender into society. We are all around you already. Sorry, we got social worker, therapists, counselors, doctors, teachers who identify as transgender. So it's very easy. There's no challenges. It's very easy.
Because Section 377A isn't enforced, you can live a fairly gay lifestyle without facing persecution in Singapore.
It's better to accept the legal untidiness and the ambiguity. If you try and force the issue and settle the matter definitively, one way or the other, instead of forging a consensus, we will divide and polarize our society.
What are your thoughts on retaining 377A without enforcement? Should we live and let live? Are you in favor of settling the matter definitively?
Socially charged issues such as Section 377A call for continued discussion and open-ended resolution within the political domain where we can forge consensus rather than in win-lose outcomes in court.
As Singaporeans enter into continued discussion with the government on this highly contentious issue, we offer some deeper questions to think about. Identity. Who am I? Is a person's identity rooted in an objective, concrete reality or in subjective internal feelings? Is this person black or white?
I identify as black.
These photos shared by her estranged family, where she's clearly blonde-haired and blue-eyed.
Nothing about being white describes who I am.
Is this person 69 or 49?
How old are you today?
My biological age is about 42, the doctor says,
right.
But legally I'm 69. I will
so you
become
want
70.
to identify 17 years?
Yeah, because you know,
Sorry,
I feel like that.
Is this person a human being or a serpent dragon?
I have 8 horns on my head. I've had most of my teeth removed. I am in the process of doing a full-body head-to-toe tattoo. I had my ears removed. You know, I'm a serpent dragon.
Is this person Korean or British?
You know, I've had like 18 plastic surgeries now, and I do look Korean now. I do feel Korean. I don't identify as British. I identify as Korean. That's just my culture. That's my home country.
Is this person male, a man, or female, a woman? What is your identity rooted in? Objective reality or subjective feelings? Freedom to love. What does love mean to you? Does expression of love always mean affirming someone? Is there room for healthy and respectful disagreement as an expression of love? Is the pursuit of love to satisfy one's own desires, to be with whoever they want and to do whatever they want? Or is the pursuit of love to seek the well-being of a loved one and to desire what's best for them? The most dangerous homosexual practice is anal intercourse. If a man really loved another man, he wouldn't engage in homosexual acts with him. Sex isn't the only way you can demonstrate your love for someone. True love would mean refraining from homosexual activities that promote dysfunction and disease. What is your definition of love? Does love mean that you agree or affirm everything a person believes or does? Behavior, rights, and duties. How shall I live? How does your identity and your definition of love influence the way you view things and the choices you make in life? Are our choices solely about ourselves, or do we consider the impact on others? How should we relate to others, and how can we have a harmonious society amidst differing points of view about these questions? What kinds of duties do we, as individuals, have towards our society? How shall we live so that we can remain one united Singapore for generations to come? Follow us on